Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating explainer about the trailblazing history and honestly, the pretty complex institutional realities of Black members in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We're going to be walking through a story that's filled with remarkable personal resilience, some very real systemic hurdles, and the slow, steady march toward inclusion within one of Canada's most iconic institutions. Let's get right into it.
Our story starts with a simple yet incredibly powerful childhood dream. I want to be a Mountie. That declaration came from a little boy named Hartley Gosline back in the 1950s. He was watching a royal visit to Canada and was just completely captivated by the RCMP members in those striking red uniforms, riding alongside the royal family on motorcycles. And right then and there, he turned to his mother and told her that this was his dream. What's wild is that, at the time, people would say there was literally no such thing as a Black Mountie. But for Hartley, hearing that just seemed to fuel his motivation.
So that takes us to Section 1, Breaking the Color Barrier. What's really fascinating about Hartley's journey is just how fast everything progressed. He was born in St. John, New Brunswick in 1949 and sadly lost his father when he was just 5. So it was really his mother who pushed him to strive for his goals. He graduated high school in 1968, and then, with the sponsorship of a local Canadian Legion president, he entered the RCMP Academy in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is famously known as Depot, just 1 year later, in June 1969.
And then, the watershed moment arrived. Hartley Gosline's graduation as the first African-Canadian recruit officially broke the color barrier within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It absolutely changed the face of the RCMP forever. But, as you might guess, making history was anything but an easy assignment.
Which brings us right into Section 2, Inside the Training Academy. According to the source text, there was a pretty jarring institutional mindset at play inside Depot during that era. Believe it or not, it was felt by some trainers that subjecting Black cadets to racial name-calling was somehow, quote, useful and appropriate. The justification given in the source material was that cadets would likely experience this type of language out working in the field anyway, so it was basically treated as a twisted form of preparation. To understand how this actually played out in reality, we just have to look at morning parade. This was a daily ritual of inspection at 5:30 in the morning. An instructor told Gosline that he stuck out, that he made the troop look bad, and that he better be white by 6 a.m. the next day. Now, Gosline did note that several other instructors actually went out of their way to help him adjust. But that specific comment really underscores the stark, unfiltered reality he had to face every day. Despite these immense pressures, Gosline showed incredible resilience. He later recalled, "Through it all, I felt like a Mountie." And this survival wasn't just an individual effort, it was highly collective. He had a crucial support system in his 32-man troop. Whenever anything negative was directed towards him, the other 31 guys would literally close ranks to protect and support him. It's a powerful testament to the camaraderie among the cadets themselves.
And that resilience carried over directly into his career in the field. Gosline wasn't just some symbolic figure. He was an active, traveling Mountie. In those days, you didn't usually get posted near your home province, so he jumped at the chance to head out to Nova Scotia, serving in New Glasgow and Dartmouth. From there, he moved on to the Security Intelligence Service in Toronto, before transferring to contract duties out west in Jasper and Edmonton. He did this specifically to avoid being stereotyped into just one type of policing.
The impact he had on the communities he served was just profound. While he was in Dartmouth, Gosline recounted this one time he was driving his police car in the North Preston area, and an older man waved him over. The man was actually crying. He hugged Gosline and said, "I never thought I'd live to see this." Gosline himself said the moment almost brought tears to his own eyes. It really shows exactly why representation matters so much. It deeply, deeply touches the communities being served. Let's move on to Section 3, Pushing for National Inclusion. Fast forward to the late 1980s, and it became pretty obvious to the RCMP that their force was not representative of the citizens they were serving. This prompted a much more aggressive approach to recruiting. By 1988, a national recruiting team was formed specifically to encourage members of visible minorities to consider a career with the force. You had constables like Howard Adams and Tony Upshaw featured heavily on promotional posters, traveling all across Canada. And this proactive drive actually worked. Over the next 15 years, the number of Black members in the force increased significantly. However, with this new push came a lot of public misconceptions, which the source material goes out of its way to clearly debunk.
A major myth floating around was that the entrance exams were somehow made easier. But the reality? The minimum standards remained absolutely strict. The pass mark set by the force was never lowered, and there was no quota system. In fact, the entrance exam was actively vetted by a Black advisory committee to ensure there were no biases. But make no mistake, if you didn't meet the standard, you didn't get in, period.
Now let's look at a more localized issue in Section 4, tensions in Nova Scotia. So while recruiting was improving on a national level, community relations on the ground in Nova Scotia's H Division during the 1990s were becoming really strained. The sources outline several specific points of friction here. In 1991, there was a window-breaking event that brought negative national media attention to the Black community. Around the same time, a crackdown on prostitution in Eastern Canada led to a few arrests, which made many Preston men feel their entire community was being unfairly targeted and stereotyped. On top of that, there was unrest at Cole Harbour High School, which got portrayed as racial incidents solely based on the skin color of the students involved. The RCMP tried to fix this tension by putting out a call across the country to bring more Black members back to Nova Scotia. But the source material points out that this was actually a deeply flawed approach. The institution was essentially posting Black members into these highly volatile situations, operating under the assumption that they'd automatically be accepted by the community just because of the color of their skin. According to the analysis, it was a wildly simplistic attempt to solve a very complex, deep-rooted issue. This brings us to Section 5, the first Black female Mountie. We're going to return to a personal narrative here to highlight another absolute trailblazer, the first Black female Mountie, Andrea Elaine Lawrence. Andrea was hired in 1987. That's 13 years after the RCMP graduated its first female members in 1974. Born in Toronto, she was known by everyone for being incredibly bright, bubbly, and outgoing. Her interest in the legal system was likely sparked by her dad, who had been a police officer in Jamaica. She started out on general duty before moving into traffic enforcement. But Andrea's story took a really sudden, tragic turn. In 1991, she applied for the famed RCMP musical ride, which requires an incredibly intense training regimen in Ottawa. On a damp, rainy day, she was sent to train on a wet practice field with a horse she was totally unfamiliar with. Tragically, she was thrown from the horse and suffered a severe spinal injury. She did manage to return to desk duties briefly in Burnaby, but the injury eventually made regular duties impossible, leading to a medical discharge. Before her discharge, Andrea actually took formal action against the force and one of the musical ride instructors. According to her brother, she strongly felt that her gender and the color of her skin played a part in the way she was treated during her tryout and in the circumstances surrounding her injury. She later accepted a corporate job in Toronto, but sadly passed away at her home in 2003. She was only 39 years old. Her story serves as a really poignant reminder of the multifaceted, intersectional challenges these early trailblazers faced. That leads us into our final segment, Section 6, the long road ahead. Stepping back to look at the institutional data from the early 2000s really helps us understand the progress that had been made since Hartley Gosline first walked into Depot. By approximately 2002, when the force initiated a census through the Employment Equity Act, there were around 200 Black members actively serving. Now, that number is certainly encouraging. It shows a direct, tangible result of those aggressive recruiting campaigns we looked at earlier.
But when you contextualize that number, you really start to see the reality of the mountains still left to climb. At that time, the overall visible minority composition of the massive 16,000-member force sat at just around 6%. So, while the door was finally propped open, the rooms inside were still largely reflective of a bygone era.
Which leaves us with a final, really vital question to think about. How do we measure the true pace of institutional change over time? Is it simply by looking at the numbers and percentages on a spreadsheet? Or is it by understanding the lived experiences, the unfair burdens, and the immense personal sacrifices of people like Hartley Gosline and Andrea Elaine Lawrence? What you should really take away from this explainer is that breaking a barrier is just the very first step. Changing the culture behind it takes decades of resilience. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this gave you a clear, focused understanding of this vital chapter in history. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.